Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And today we've been to see Alien Romulus, the new instalment in the Alien franchise. We were just seeing that there have been 7. This is the 7th. Apparently Alien vs Predator doesn't count as canon. Who knew? It was just a bit of fun in the middle. One of the things that the Alien series has done to distinguish itself in cinema is leave its directors' stamps on it in all sorts of interesting ways. And it's had a number of big name directors. So it started off with Ridley Scott, who and with him in 1979 was it?
Yeah.
Came a whole new aesthetic of what kind of space exploration was, because you'd had sort of 2001: A Space Odyssey and all these sci-fi films in the 50s and 60s which were about the wonder that space could bring and marvellous spaceships and all this kind of thing. And then you had this industrial, this is a corporation in space, and just as they do on Earth, they are raping space for all it can give them.
I remember it being marketed as a horror film.
Yeah, well, it certainly was.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't marketed as like a space movie or anything. It was really, I mean, it took place in space, but it was, I remember it being marketed as a horror film.
Yeah, for sure. And then came Aliens, the second in the series, directed by James Cameron, who was already big, having done Terminator. And he turned into much more an action thing.
Yes.
And I do kind of think that, because I've been seeing some of the response to this film, and also I've seen the response to the previous couple, Prometheus and Covenant, which were both Ridley Scott and both had sort of mixed reception. And I do kind of think that there are almost like two kinds of Alien fans. There's the Alien fans who love Alien, and the Aliens fans who love Aliens. And it's whether you like the kind of the lore and the mythology and all that kind of stuff, which is what Prometheus and Covenant went quite heavy on. Certainly Prometheus did. Or whether you like the more action-oriented stuff. It's just a bit of fun with aliens in space hunting.
Well,
around,
but
which this, I think...
But James Cameron's Aliens was not just a bit of fun. I mean, it was enormous fun. And actually, I remember seeing it at the Imperial Cinema, which was a huge kind of cinema, completely packed, with the audience responding to absolutely everything in the film. And it was very funny as well. But, I think people were also moved, and they responded to Sigourney Weaver and the girl, and the whole theme of motherhood, and there was that kind of butch dykey kind of colleague in the spaceship. I mean, there were a lot of things that the film is about.
Absolutely. I wasn't trying to diminish it by saying it's just a bit of fun, but I was kind of trying to point out a difference between how invested you are in the depth of the story and so on. I think that...
Okay, no, I get that, but I just
absolutely.
don't want to minimise one.
Sure. So Aliens was enormously successful. Then we had Alien 3, which was directed by David Fincher, before he became the David Fincher we know of today.
Yes.
Before Seven, before Fight Club, and then obviously he's gone on to become this powerhouse director-producer.
I love that also, but I was in the minority.
Yes. Yeah, I haven't seen Alien 2 either, but I haven't seen all of Aliens 3. And I mean, I think like a mate and I put it on when we were sort of 16 years old, and it was on a very small telly, and we just weren't getting into it, and we turned it off. But you were saying, yes, like an art film, right?
Yeah, it is.
Again, it changes the dynamic once again.
I think it's kind of beautiful. I read it at the time as a kind of a metaphor for AIDS. Yeah, that kind of, so death is imminent, and the whole world is like clammy and sweaty and coffee and...
Was it not also... Is it full of men as well? Wasn't it like a ship full of YY chromosome people that like the manliest of the mannish? I seem to recall something like that about the setup.
I can't remember.
So maybe that fed into the
reading.
reading.
I should see it again, but I remember very vividly thinking of the film as a kind of an AIDS metaphor.
Sure.
And of course there would have been the period in which one did see, kind of those... It was that moment, or just immediately after that moment.
Then we had Aliens Resurrection in, I think, 97 this is now.
Which I have not seen.
Which I've seen. So that's directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, whose most well-known film is Amélie, probably. I mean, they did the 2 films that you will recognise of his filmography, I think. I think it's a really interesting film. I mean, if Alien 3 went down badly, Alien 4 went down at least just as badly, And it had a thing that happens that... One of the things that happens in that film is sort of enacted to an extent in this film. We'll get into spoiler territory in a little bit. I mean, it's certainly true to say that this film is calling on, at the very least, Alien 1, 2 and 4. I don't know about 3 so much, but it's calling on its...
And Prometheus as well.
Yes, yeah. So in terms of kind of lore, history, and also just reference. You know, it reenacts certain things and reconfigures certain things. Yeah, so you also get then Prometheus and Covenant, where, well, Prometheus wasn't even revealed really to be an alien film, was it? I mean, until the very end, when you saw a xenomorph or xenomorph-like creature, and it all kind of became very clear because it was Ridley Scott, and it looked like Alien. So everyone's going, "Is this an Alien film?" And then yes, it was an Alien film, a very prequely Alien film that was full of ideas, and I mean, beautiful to look at. We saw it together at the, well, I don't think it was an IMAX by then, but the Birmingham big screen. It looked incredible. And what people mostly got caught up in was the fact that when she runs away from the ship at the end, she could just run to the side and she won't die. And it's like, just shut up. There's so much more to the film. Than, you know. And then Covenant, which also got mixed reception, but I had quite good fun in it. It was a bit sort of monster Frankenstein-y sort of, you know, Revenge of the Monster type of thing. I quite enjoyed it. This is very heavy on the action stuff, I would say. But I think it's a good combination of sci-fi and horror. It's directed by, who you were just pointing out the director.
It's directed by Fede Alvarez.
Who's Uruguayan and has a horror pedigree.
Yes, he's Uruguayan, and he's directed Evil Dead, Don't Breathe, The Girl in the Spider's Web, Don't Breathe 2, the 2022 reboot of Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Those two, Don't Breathe 2 and Texas Chainsaw, he didn't direct, but he wrote on.
Oh, sorry, that's right, you're right.
Yeah.
So he directed Evil Dead, Don't Breathe, The Girl in the Spider's Web, and then Alien Romulus. But I think it's interesting that he also did the story and was a producer on Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because what that indicates to me is that he's worked on big franchise reboots.
This very much fits in.
Yeah, types of films where you've got to know, you know, what the world is, you know, what the basic narrative is, what the major plot and iconography is. Yeah, kind of, because, you know, you want to kind of reproduce some of those pleasures in a different way and in a different version. So, and I think we get all of that in Alien Romulus, really.
Very much so, for better or for worse, and we'll maybe get into whether it is better or worse. So just briefly, the story here is a brand new set of characters we've never met before. Kids, sort of teenagers and people in their young 20s. It's a very Zoomer film. They live and grow up in a mining colony on a planet some 65 light years from Earth. So, you know, by this point in time, I don't know how well it's been established. I don't know exactly where it fits in the alien history and stuff, but the universe or the galaxy has been very much colonized by this point. This is a planet that is there to be extracted from. And they don't have parents, most of them. They've all died in industrial accidents and things like that. They're all essentially kind of orphaned or parented by the company in some sense. The company won't let them leave. They all want these travel visas. It won't happen. And they decide that they've got to go and do it for themselves. They see this ship, a former Weyland-Yutani, that's the big corporation, Weyland-Yutani kind of derelict ship. They think they can make some use of it, use it to escape the planet, essentially. And they invite the main character, played by Kelly Spaney. What is her name? Rain. I don't remember hearing her name in the film.
Yes. No, you do it all the time because the robot says it.
I maybe just completely ignored the fact that she was called that. Anyway, she's called Rain, and they invite her along because she has a synth. We've seen synths in the films before, androids essentially. And even though one of the two of the characters really don't like the synth, because they have their own history with them, they're invited aboard because the synth is very useful to them. It'll be able to help them make use of the ship because it's a Weyland-Yutani device itself. I mean, it's not something. It's something that she found. You know, none of these people own anything. It's very much these people have grown with nothing. They manage to make their escape from the surface of the planet. They go up to a space station looking for a cryofuel that will help them sleep on the way to their destination. And on this sort of space station, they encounter, wouldn't you know it, an alien. So, I mean, spoilers will be coming up. And there are spoilers. And there are references to other films, all that kind of stuff. We'll be spoiling it. I'd start off by saying I just had a really good time. And I'm sure I'm going to come up with all flaws and all issues and stuff. But I had such a good time in this. I think the pace is fantastic. I like everyone in it. I like the feel of it. It really gets that feel of the derelict, that feeling of the company does nothing for you and you have to survive yourself with it, you know.
Well, it not only doesn't do anything for you. It actively oppresses you, right? Like,
Takes everything from you.
You know, it takes everything from you, including your life and your parents and everything. And it ignores contracts. It changes your contract at will, right? So one of the first scenes in the film is that, you know, she goes to get away, she serves her time, and then when she goes to kind of get that visa or whatever, they tell her, no, your time's been doubled because the company kind of needs you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever your will is doesn't matter at all. So it's a very oppressive kind of corporate system. I loved the first 15-20 minutes in that mining world, right? Like, you know, the neon, the darkness, the kind of people bustling, but in a tired, distracted kind of way. I thought it was kind of like a very, very visually beautiful and expressive way of constructing the oppressiveness of that world.
Yeah, it works very, very well. And this is where, right at the start is where I start thinking, oh, it's so important that these are kids. I think it really relates to their generation today in the real world, because there's a certain thing which is universal, which is that hyper-capitalism takes everything from you, it gives nothing back. But that's been true in Alien throughout. It's always been making that kind of critique of the world. So that's not particularly the generational thing. What I think feels kind of generational is that scene in which they express it for themselves. We have to get away. We're not going to get anything back. We have to take the opportunity. That feels like it has a real connection to. It feels that like they're basically people who resign's not the right word, but they have realised how little the world is going to give them.
I love that, and then that becomes part of my criticism of the film.
Yeah.
Because I did think that was kind of like so powerful and well dramatized and so on. And I think it should have been rewarded. Yeah, like you should have offered some success in that. The struggle should have been worth it because the cause was good, right? Like they were, And I did think that, like, kind of spoilers, but killing everyone off except the heroine and her synth. Well, the heroine, because the synth, you're not sure whether the synth will make it. I think that was kind of a dramatic mistake, a narrative mistake, that it didn't offer. You know, you could have had like a moment of cheer, and the film could have ended up on a much more upbeat kind of.
It ends on a note of relief that she's got away, but it's very much a genre convention. The final girl, right? So,
well, yeah, but yes, I suppose it's true. But I mean, is it true of all the Aliens films that no one else survives except Sigourney Weaver? I can't remember.
I mean, I don't know, but well, I wasn't saying necessarily a franchise convention, but a genre convention of horror. Certainly.
Well, it's a genre convention of horror, but we've just established that the series is not a horror series. You know, it's like almost every film is done in a different type of genre, right? So, you know, kind of. I mean, this definitely has that last girl element to it. But whether it should have or whether it could have or whatever is a different story. I don't see why it needs to have had it.
No, that's true. You know, I mean, you can do what you want with these stories. Obviously, there's no rule about it. I get you.
And I'm just riffing off your point about the generational thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, I would agree that I think that kind of falls by the wayside. It's set up as the feeling that these characters have. As I say, you know, the world is not for them. It's going to take everything from them, and we have to make something of ourselves, do it ourselves. And once they get onto the ship, the kind of the ideals of getting away to this new place, you know, they're forgotten about because it becomes an issue of survival right now. You know,
yes.
And then we never return to that. There's no feeling at the end, as you say, when there's that feeling of relief that she's managed to survive this. I think there is an indication of, you know, because we see that the thing on the screen of the destination to this new planet that they've been talking about the whole time is set, and she's finally on her way there. But it is, as you say, it's a relief that they've survived this. It's not or she survived this. It's not a triumph.
I didn't like it because I thought you could have ended it on, I suppose, I don't know. Because I don't think the film needs to end on a hopeful note. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I think you could have responded to those generational concerns, because as it is right now, the only person who survived to go to this new world is the person who didn't want to go. Yeah. With maybe her synth that she calls her brother. But actually, all those other kind of very attractive people that we saw at the beginning of the film, that all had hopes and aspirations and, romances and whatever, like kind of, they all got destroyed. And of course, you expect most of them to, go in the film. But I think it didn't do the film any service that she was the only one.
Okay. I mean, I expected them all to go.
Yeah.
I think I see the series as much more connected to horror as a genre than you seem to. I mean, I think as you're absolutely right that it has moved through different genres and taken on elements of different genres, but I think fundamentally it's always been a horror series.
Yes. Well, I mean, in Aliens, Sigourney kind of, survived with her daughter, with the girl, not her daughter.
Newt.
And I think that in this one, she survives with perhaps her synth, who's in critical condition. So
I'm just saying I feel there's no surprise that everyone else perished.
Well, I think it wasn't a surprise for me either, but I think it was a disappointment. I think the film could have done something much more kind of interesting and dramatically kind of textured by having someone else survive, right? I mean, I think if the pregnant girl had survived, they would have shifted the film in a completely different direction. If the guy who she ends up with when the gangs get separated, right, had survived, that would have taken the film in a kind of a slightly different direction as well, right? So, I mean, you expect that selfish nitwit who hates synth would...
The cousin, yeah.
I thought that was also, by the way, a very poorly written character because, you can understand why he's angry for a bit, but, it's all one note kind of angry and violent and so on. So you think,
he doesn't differentiate between when it might be a good idea to have a go at the synth and when it might not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, to be fair, again, this is sort of horror in particular. No one's that bright. People very often aren't that bright, and he certainly is not that bright.
Well, I think it's poorly written and kind of, let's move away from horror because I think there's also, a thing of distinguishing, some kind of, $1 million quickie that kind of might have really good scares, from an alien film that has been kind of clearly worked through and thought about and designed and you expect these things to have had a really good going over, right? And thought through the relations and the repercussions of these things. And that is a very one-note character that they don't do very much with. They didn't even give him a laugh or a joke the way that the other films did. And I think the same for... the East Asian girl, right? Like, I think there's meant to be a relationship between her and Chavez and Aliens, right? Like, the same type of haircut and, the can-do attitude and so on. But the character is not given very much to work with or do, right? So I think all of those things were kind of a bit disappointing because the film, I agree with you. First of all, it looked beautiful. Right, I think the design to me was astonishing. Right, those moments where the airship at the beginning goes up and you get their first glimpse of the sun. Yeah, I mean,
which the film tells you they've never seen.
Yeah, and you really feel it, right? So they're beautiful, gorgeous visuals, and the visuals really evoke that feeling of awe and wonder at the sun. Right? So I loved all of that. And I love the way it moves and the way that it does action, actually, right? So to me, it was a disappointment that the film wasn't more cathartic or emotionally involving or, that it didn't have an emotional resonance that it could so easily have had. And that actually, I think the other films did, right? I mean, I remember Aliens vividly kind of having that emotional resonance, kind of you're rooting for Sigourney Weaver and you're rooting for her child and you're rooting for the development of that relationship with the child, right? Like,
that's an interesting point, actually, rooting, because I was thinking the films have always been about Ripley, or at least until the prequel era they were. They were so focused on Sigourney Weaver's character, and it was about, you rooted for her. And here, Katie Spaney is interpreting a new kind of Ripley role.
Yes.
Right? And you could see her leading another few movies, I think, on basis. I think she's very good. But it's funny you say that. I don't think I rooted for her.
No,
I wanted her to win, but did I feel it?
A lot of her decisions, again, I think it's a kind of underwriting, right?
Yeah.
Because, they don't make sense, right? So you don't get emotionally involved. Like, I thought when she went back for the synth, I thought she was just being stupid, right? Like, kind of, so...
But she hasn't learned to divorce her emotion from it, and that's...
Well, it's a machine, right? Like, I mean, because it isn't... And also, there's a thing, if the film shows you, right, or narrates for you how these are the dangers, right, that she faces,
Mm-hmm.
and then, she takes a chance because her friend is worth saving, you get it. But when all you see is like 50,000, monsters hanging from the ceiling, and she goes to get her synth, I just thought it's stupid. Like, I mean, she'll survive it, right? But your emotional involvement with the decision making, the risk, all of those things that kind of are things that get you involved with the character and what she's doing become just so kind of uninvolving. Yeah.
I know what you mean, because I think this is true of what you were saying about the characters as well earlier, that the pilot character takes off from a previous character. I don't think it's... I think it's partly that she does, but I think it's also that they're all just types. I mean, that is a type of character, like the kind of the slightly masculine woman who pilots the thing, and she knows, or how all the shit works. It's like a Michelle Rodriguez kind of...
Yeah.
Like, that's a type.
Yeah.
And all these characters are kind of types, and including the angry guy and the guy who actually knows what he's doing, and the girl who's kind of young and doesn't and is a bit scared or whatever, has to grow into it. These are all types, and I think the same thing is going on with basically all the kind of plotting and setup. So, as you say, she's going to go back for the synth. The dangers that face her, and that she'll survive them however she manages it. And the film doesn't dramatise well enough, I think. It doesn't make that tense enough. It doesn't make you believe it enough when that happens, even though and I think it's because in some way this is how it's going to go. It almost kind of feels perfunctory.
It feels perfunctory because it's poorly written. So again, just to underline the point, when there's so much danger and the film doesn't give you a clue as to how the character might overcome it, it just seems so impossible. And yet she will come out of it.
Exactly.
Right? So it feels like right? Like it makes no sense. Of course you're not involved in that kind of thing. I mean, likewise, I thought, so the elevator sequence, right? Which was, I think, very beautifully filmed, that play on gravity, and it was kind of like exciting to watch. But again, it wasn't emotionally involving because you as a viewer have no clear sense of what they have to do to get out of it, right? Like, so you see the gun is hanging there, right? But what could happen that one of them might kind of be able to reach for that gun that she lost, or, what is it about the gravity? So, the monsters are approaching, and something will crop up, right? But actually kind of what it could be, and what they need to do in order to make that happen, that's never kind of, shown to the viewer. So kind of, it moves beautifully, it's exciting on one level, but it actually kind of lacks the emotional depth that better films offer.
I'm not sure I wholly agree with that in terms of the way that the action is sort of set up and shown to you. So in that lift scene, for instance, I think it's quite clear because the gravity thing's been turned back on, so we know that at some point gravity is going to...
You're given a countdown.
We're given a countdown.
Yeah.
So gravity is going to make the lift dangerous because it's at the top at the moment. It's going to make that dangerous very soon. They've got to get out of the way and make the progress that they can before that. And of course they don't quite in time. And so we see Adam. Is it Adam? Andy, the synth, is holding it because he's very strong because he's a robot. But then I think, it becomes quite clear once the aliens are coming there that, so yes, you've got the gun stuck in the wall. And I think what is not made enough of is like her trying to reach for it. Like you need to see her kind of going for it and not being able to, and then something else changes, and then the lift starts coming down, and then you go, okay, what's happening now is the lift's going to crush all the aliens. That's great, but now the issue is getting out of the way, which obviously it happens, but it's not. There's minutiae in how that's being put together that doesn't quite draw out the tension or the twist or the shock as it could. But I think it all kind of makes sense, and a lot of what's going on in terms of the action is kind of improvisational. Like, it's not like, here's the plan, do we execute it? It's kind of, here's something to react to, here's how we reacted, here's the result, and here's how we have to react to the new result. You know, like the when they're stuck in the cryo chamber right at the start, which is where, you know, the cryo chamber then starts warming up, and all of the face huggers in there start coming alive. You know, so the situation they're faced with is, we're stuck in here. The situation becomes, we're stuck in here with face huggers, and then it becomes, how are we going to react to the face huggers? How are we going to be able to, you know, and then it's like smashing the door, or she tries to smash the door, doesn't quite make it, but of course that gives the face huggers the opportunity to break out of it. Everything has a consequence and a new way that it can be used a little bit later. I think that's kind of good. You know, I like that.
Well, I like that in terms of the action bits, but I think the film lacks emotional resonance, and you know, and it didn't kind of involve me with the characters. I mean, I was excited by the action and by the look of the film, right? But I wasn't involved with the characters, and I think, you know, and I think it is the writing. The actors weren't made distinct enough. I think the moral choices were not clear enough, or weren't complex enough, or weren't believable enough. I think at the very basis, you know, you're told that she thinks of the synth as her brother, which of course initially seems odd because, you know, he's black, she's white, and then of course you realize later that he's a synth, but why she thinks of him as her brother rather than her synth is not at all made clear to me, right? So you're told that the father said, keep her safe, but he is a machine, right? Or, you know, what is it about him and her and their relationship that has changed from being a synth or a machine to actually having an emotional connection with each other that is then lost and then refound? I mean, that to me was not clear.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of clear, but just not deep enough. Like, it's assumed. It's assumed that she's told you that she sees him as a brother just by calling him.
Yeah, you're told
a brother.
that.
We're told that, and so it's just assumed that we buy it and feel it, and you actually do need more development of it.
Of course you do.
And that I think is the issue, because everything is there kind of in the most basic terms on paper. These, you know, she sees it as a brother. These two are cousins. They have a relationship. That's the ex-girlfriend. I think they have a relationship. Like, it's all on paper, but how much do you really feel? Do you really feel it when he loses his cousin? You know.
Yes.
For instance, or when they start just losing crew members, how much do you feel it?
But I think the thing with, what's the synth's name again?
Andy.
The thing with Andy is much more important, right? Because it recurs throughout the film. It's a really important plot point. You know, there's the emotional decision of, well, you were going to leave me and here because I'm just a machine, and you remember that, right? So there's the reversal. So actually, this idea of how he's not a machine, or he's not just a machine, or he's more than a machine, or that needs to have been shown to you in kind of, you know, a variety of ways. Because actually, my own response to the film is, well, but he's a machine. Why go back for him, right? Like,
I know.
He's not a person. Right?
Yeah, and my response is, I get it, but it's true that it's not really dramatised. You don't feel it. You just know that that's going to happen because she feels that way.
All right.
You know, I mean, that's my response to it. Like, I buy it because the film's asking me to, but it's not selling it to me, really.
No.
It's just telling me to accept this.
I didn't buy it. I didn't get involved. I mean, I accepted it. You know, that is what the film wants you to see their relationship as. But, you know, but why?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
okay, let's move on to other things. We've gone through how the characters don't satisfy us. And
yes.
Let's think about Ian Holm. This has been an issue. So someone was going to be reanimated, and a lot of people, hearing the rumour, thought it was going to be Bill Paxton. I guess people just really like Bill Paxton, and he recently died. But no, they've brought back, in a combination of animatronic and CGI form, Ian Holm. And I have really mixed feelings about this. So he becomes quite an important character. It's not just he shows up for a bit. He becomes fairly important. So Ian Holm played Ash in the original Alien. And one of the twists in the original Alien was that he was an android. And here he's called Rook. So it's not the same character, but it's established through a bit of dialogue with Andy that these are models. So he's the Ash model, the Rook model, and Andy is the Andy model of synth. So the character's made distinct, which immediately says to me, this doesn't have to be, you don't have to bring Ian Holm back from the dead. No. You can have a different model. You could even have a Michael Fassbender model. He was a synth in the other films. Yeah. You could just have a brand new actor. They've gone to the trouble of creating this Ian Holm animatronic and then doing extra work, this is what I was reading, doing extra work with CGI on the face and then doing extra work with generative AI to make the voice actor's voice sound more like Ian Holmes. I have really mixed feelings about this because I mean, it's done with the kind of, with the consent and even the enthusiastic consent of Ian Holmes' widow. Ian Holm died a few years ago, which is why he's not been involved in this. And this is a Disney film as well. And Disney have done this before to a degree, or actually to a greater degree, in some sense, with Rogue One, where they did a fully CGI Princess Leia, Peter Cushing. I think, were they both in Rogue One? And, you know, again, this is like an actor is providing the performance upon which this CGI construction is based. But you're bringing back the image and to an extent, or kind of an imitation of the performance that this actor can no longer give.
Well, I mean, in a way, he's meant to be a machine, so, you know, you can't criticize it on its lack of liveliness or authenticity or... So...
Well, that's certainly not my criticism. I mean, because actually, I think they actually would have been even better had it looked a little bit less lifelike, you know. But no, the criticism is an ethical one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think on ethical grounds, it shouldn't be done. I mean, I think there's nothing good about the art or for the art or for the actors that comes out of this process. It's a way of both cheapening what they pay them and not appreciating what actors do and can do. A way, you know, every iteration is a diminishment of the original, I think, you know, through CGI. So kind of, you know, on ethical grounds, it's completely damnable in my view. I think there's an interesting aspect in terms of what the film is trying to do. I can see why the filmmakers might have been very, very keen on it because, you know, the film is kind of a matrix or you know, it's a film that's bouncing off all the other films. Yeah, that's kind of bringing elements from each of them into play and referring back to them and so on. And obviously, this is an important aspect of it, yeah? It's a way of referring to the kind of the first Aliens films, the way that the film subsequently refers to, you know, Aliens 2 and kind of Prometheus and, you know, and so on. So it brings that whole kind of series at play in subtle ways, because I don't think you have to have seen any of those films, you know, to enjoy this
I understand it.
Yeah, but actually it is, you know, and I think this is something that we saw from Freddy Alvarez's, you know, yeah, that he's kind of conscious of these worlds that the series creates, and he basically kind of brings the world of you know, the Alien series at play in this particular narrative through getting components from, you know, each of the different films and bringing them. So the Ian Holm section, yeah, is a way of kind of, you know, bringing that to life again in a kind of a new installment in a way that anchors this particular film in the series.
So here's one I think. I didn't hate the way the film was referencing and building on previous films. But I do think the film would have been just as good had it done a lot less of that. It's still clearly set in the alien world. You know, the alien is still the alien. We still have Weyland-Yutani and so on. And it was, I find it kind of disappointing, which is not to say it should be surprising, but it's certainly disappointing that this is another example of a franchise sort of swallowing itself, having to refer back to itself. It's a little bit like when we talk about Marvel films having to have certain characters in them because of contractual this, that, the other, whatever it might be. And that's where they feel. This has that feeling of
Well, this has to me less of that feeling. Yeah, because I mean, this is not, I don't think, about any contract or any contractual obligation.
No, absolutely
There isn't
not.
something that they must do.
I think
there's a creative dimension to these choices in a way that you don't see in those recent Marvel films, which are often about who's available.
I think that there is less of a creative feeling than maybe you feel, because I think there is a sense in which that, like, the studio that runs this franchise, you can make another Alien film and have people know it's another Alien film and fits into the series. The extent to which they are bringing things back in, particularly Ian Holmes' likeness, feels excessive, and in Ian Holmes' case, exploitative.
Yes,
It insists upon its history, it insists upon its fandom, it insists upon all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't mind it. I mean, I didn't mind any of that. My main thing about the film is that it lacks emotional resonance and thematic complexity, which are two huge faults. So actually the film is very sophisticated about its creation of the world, about its cross-referencing, its use of the world, right? Like, and I liked all of that. I didn't have a particular problem with that. I mean, I think there is an ethical consideration about the uses of Ian Holm, though, I think if they paid his estate.
Well, yeah, there is that. Well, this is the other side of the Ian Holm thing for me, because this is why I had mixed feelings. Because I was thinking, let's say there was no... I think you can tell where the animatronic ends and the CGI begins. The kind of... the additions in the animation to the face, you can tell, are not physical, right? But it's not the same as building a completely brand new CGI Peter Cushing, for instance, right? It's not. It's based on something real that they've done work with physically, this animatronic. And I was thinking, let's say they'd done it purely animatronically, and you can make very, very sophisticated animatronics that I think would have done the job brilliantly. And the fact that he's a robot who's had his bottom half torn off and is alive now after however many years, that would have some relationship to a kind of shonkiness, a kind of a lack of life or a lack of fluidity in its movement, which I think a real animatronic, full animatronic thing would have had. If they'd done that with no CGI on top, would I have been okay with that? I was kind of thinking maybe I would. I don't know.
Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm okay
maybe
with
to a more
it
degree.
now.
Maybe because it's harder work or feels like harder work. Actually, it's probably harder work to do it with that and CGI.
I liked him.
Yeah.
I liked the character. I liked the way that he was used. All the things that I would normally criticize on it, I don't, because he's meant to be a robot and a machine, and the clunky movement, the line readings that are, kind of by rote and so on. I thought it fit in really well. The clunkiness of the movement, because he does move very clunkily when he does. I thought all of that fit. That is not my problem with the film. I mean, I think, my problem with the film is, what they do with the real characters, with the real people.
Yeah, okay.
Right? and actually with the new synth, right? Because kind of he's meant to have this emotional connection with this girl, but then, it gets eliminated. I thought there was a hint there of something interesting when she says, whatever his name is, like, are you still in there? Wake up. I thought actually there was an echo or a resonance or, some electric wave in him that, still had a memory of his feelings for her, right? That would have made it much more interesting. But no, it's like you remove the disc and, he becomes a different type of robot, right? Like, and taking orders from a different person. I mean, I thought that was very uninteresting.
Well, I think the thing is that I'm completely okay with him as a synth being pure machine and pure programming and pure, when he's given a disc that gives him a new prime directive, that becomes his prime directive. I think that's cool because...
Not in this film.
Because what it should then be is all on the Kaylee Spaney character and the Kaylee Spaney performance about her belief in this synth as something she has a relationship with and something that she loves, and her inability to let go of that fact when it might be useful to, or the fact that the fact that she does hold on to it for so long is what drives her to succeed at something she might otherwise not. So that's where it should be interesting. It's not so much that I want to get a feeling out of the Andy character. I don't think I should. He should just be robot and no feeling. It should all be about her relationship to it.
Well, fair enough.
And that's what it's not. Well, that's what it doesn't sell.
Yeah, well, it doesn't sell that for sure. But no, I would have liked, because you could also do something interesting about, which is a thing about Blade Runner. At one point, do these machines have the potentiality to become human? And certainly kind of the film is constructed on that basis that you never then feel. So some of the things then become kind of really stupid in the film. So that whole thing where the pregnant woman is on the other side of the door and they're screaming, open the door, open the door. It's so clear that they open the door, they'll all die, right? So kind of all the drama that follows after it just kind of lost me because it just feels stupid. Like, don't they understand that that's what would happen, right? Like, I mean, kind of, maybe not, at the beginning, but certainly kind of, to make that whole thing last 5 minutes or whatever seems stupid because, it's clear to us that that's what will happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So. Well, if the film has done the right work in getting you to feel the strength of the relationships, for instance, and to feel the sense of betrayal from Andy, because he would normally open the door for them, but now his prime directive says no. Then I think you get something like that, even though well, actually, even in that situation, if it's done the work and it gets you to feel that way, you probably don't know whether he'll open the door or not, because you feel like if he opens the door, then some other route of escape might be available. Like, you don't know what will happen. But here, I think that, his decision to not open the door is sort of fine and it makes perfect sense. But yeah, the reactions, I don't necessarily quite buy, or just the I don't know, the feeling of the scene, for want of a better phrase, I don't quite buy. It hasn't done enough to work its way into me.
Well, I agree, but I would also go further. I mean, to me, it's a key example of how the film, on one level, is very well written, on a kind of a narrative plot world level, but in terms of characters and relationships, it's very poorly written. Because that is a scene where you could have expected the pregnant girl to have one type of response and reaction, because she doesn't know what's going on. She doesn't know why they're not opening the door for her, right? The brother to have had a different type of relation, because that's his sister, right? Like, who's being lost. Yeah. The girl to have had a different response, and the robot to have, and drama comes out of those differences, right? But no, they're all having the same response except for the robot, right?
They're not differentiated. And on top of that, the Kaylee Spaney character says she's pregnant because she's found this out and no one else knows, or the girl obviously knows, but only those two know. So she's pregnant, get her out, and he still doesn't. But then does that actually come back with because you think the brother then should respond to, I was going to be an uncle. Are they brother and sister? Yeah, they are. So yeah, again, I don't remember anything coming out of that, but there may have been something I can't remember. It certainly didn't make an impact if there was.
It was anyway. I thought that was kind of just an example of how poor the film was at kind of just creating an emotional kind of world or resonance.
I just want to say about David Johnson, because I don't remember what we said about him in Right Lane. I don't think we were crazy about his performance. I don't think we were crazy about
the film. I don't remember.
I'm not sure we were crazy about his sort of charisma or lack thereof. I think, but I haven't listened back to the podcast. I would say here, physically, I think he's marvellous.
I think
especially
so too.
Right at the start, because the idea of his robot character is that it's not quite working, and you get these. He has a lot of stillness in his performance. And then you'll get a twitch of an eyelid or a cheek muscle or something that just indicates a glitch.
He's great.
And then when he gets his upgrades, his new directive and everything, his motion becomes fluid. All that goes away, and it's wonderfully modulated. I think his performance physically is marvellous, and he looks just right. I wish he would enunciate.
Well, I think the big failure of that performance is in the way that he reads that line. What is it? Kill the bitch or whatever, the Sigourney Weaver line.
Yeah, when the lift's gone down and he's got the gun out the wall and he shoots the last alien at the time at least. It says, "Get away from her," and then pause, and then he kind of unsure about the line says, "You bitch."
Yeah.
Unsure about saying a swear word.
Well, the thing is, he's meant to be a robot, so you understand the pauses and the creakiness, and so you can see what's behind the line reading, the rationale behind the line reading. But, it's one of the iconic lines in film history. I think the audience would have been primed to respond. It should have gotten a great response, and it screwed it up. It just didn't.
Yeah, it got a laugh out of the way it was done, which it was supposed to, but that's not the thing it should be going for, I guess. I mean, I wasn't crazy about them doing the line anyway. I mean, I just don't think it's particularly necessary. I think it's one of these things where it's imposing its history on itself.
I also think it's different when a woman says it and when a man says it.
Yeah, there's that. But I did, to be fair, a second after he said the line, and it gave it just a moment, I did feel a little slight welling up of kind of... And it's interesting because I was just saying how I think the robot character needs to be completely about not having an emotional relationship with anything. And it should all be on her and her inability to deal with that. But the film is definitely doing something with that, and I think where it fails in this is that it doesn't have an arc to it, and it doesn't even really set up the rules to it. It's because we don't have this thing of, we don't have a question of can synths be human? Can they think like humans? Can they feel like humans? It's not a question the film asks, which means that when you get this moment where he's done something which is kind of outside his programming, he's obviously not programmed to say you bitch and be vicious or kind of mean in that way. But he does it, and he's unsure about it. It's something not natural to him. And then he looks back at her, and you get this feeling of actual protection, caring relationship. So the film is trying to do this, does the robot feel thing, but it hasn't done any real work in setting it up. The thing it's done in terms of that is that it's talked about how robots, they're essentially like, is it utilitarianism, where it's like they'll throw away 3 lives if they can save 12, right? Which is what they talk about. That's why that one character hates synths and hates Andy, because his parents were killed by a synth when a robot made that decision.
Yeah, because they don't value human life.
They don't, but yeah, or they value the numbers, not the individuals.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So it is kind of it's saying that right at the start, like this is the way a synth thinks. And then it's showing you a synth appearing to feel or think slightly differently. But it's not coherently asking that question. It's not with kind of intention asking that question and pursuing that theme, which is why I kind of have an issue with it doing it at all. I wish it was actually more, as I say, I've said it a couple of times, I wish it just wasn't doing that. But it is interesting that it does it. And in that moment, I did feel something, so it worked just then. But I think longer term, in the scheme of the film, I think it's an issue.
Yeah.
That it's doing it at all.
Yeah. I think the film nixed certain things. I thought there was something about, the doubling of the births. So there's a pregnant woman, but then, she gives birth to, an alien, right? I thought that should have kind of had more resonance than it did. That kind of... both in terms of the narrative and in terms of the individual moments. I mean, I kind of... I'm not sure what the last fight scene between Rain, is it? Mm-hmm. And, that... hybrid alien really brought to the story, really. Right,
well, this is a spoiler for you, for Alien 4, because it's essentially taking off Alien 4. So there's that. So in Alien 4 Resurrection, you have... a human xenomorph hybrid, and it's like one of the most disgusting creatures in screen history. It's marvellous. I loved it. And you feel real sympathy for this thing. It's like, kill me. But there's a thing about I'm pretty sure in that film it ends with in fact I'm certain it ends with opening up a breach into space and getting sucked out, and the last thing you see is its face. So and this is not the first Alien film to have done breaches into space, because I think that's an Alien 2 as well, right? Yeah. Sucking the alien out into space. So, but this happens again here. So it's doing that. The monster is much less effective. It feels much less kind of meaningful. I mean, the film is constantly going on this theme and it's picking up in general terms from Alien as a whole when it's doing things about motherhood, birth, pregnancy. Like the original film it's so kind of famous for being seen as this male fear of pregnancy, the chestburster scene. And here you have so much imagery which is like really directly like that, like when the alien sack is on the wall and the opening is vaginal and he shoves his weapon into it and tries to like, and then it's almost, I almost read it as like, I say read it, this is not a real reading, but I almost saw it as like an abortion thing, like if I don't kill this alien now, I'll be looking after it for my whole life and it'll kill me, and it does kill him.
Well, I saw it as a male castration thing because he puts his rod in,
yes,
and the acid kind of melts it all.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
And he is the most sort of aggressive in a kind of masculine, angry, acting out way character we've got. Because we also have the other his brother, his cousin character, who
is very sympathetic and who I wish would have lived.
Very sympathetic, but he has sort of good masculine qualities in that he's protective and he knows how to do things. When he gets the gun, he understands things about it and stuff. And it's like, it's not that he has experience from shooting; he has experience from playing video games, which I think is quite funny. But like there is I think the film is doing some oppositional thing between good man and bad man, good masculine, bad masculine.
Yes, I think it is.
But they both perish, so. Well,
exactly, and also it's not distinguished. It's not textured enough. It doesn't have enough going for it. No. But anyway, kind of we've talked enough about it. I think the good things is it's an exciting watch and it's a fun watch, and the world it creates is amazing, and I think it's a visually stunning film, really.
Yes, so. I mean it feels expensive.
Yes.
And it feels worth it in that sense. I mean, you're in space, you're in this spaceship with these characters, and the way things are set up, the way timers put on. We talked about Trap just recently, constantly putting timers on things. This one's doing a lot of that as well, and that's a good way of raising the stakes, raising the tension, and so on. The film's doing a lot of that. It has all these really nice setups for action and tension. You just wish that the bedrock of the film was stronger.
Yeah. So, in spite of that, we recommend it. So, thank you all very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, and YouTube Music. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter at Eavesdrop Movies, and Blue Sky, eavesdropping.bsky.social, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.